So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Aaron Dodson. I am a staff software engineer on the Blockly project at the Raspberry Pi Foundation. And I want to talk to you about bugs. We have been endeavoring to squash all of them. I did not put a squash bug up here because that would be a little gory, but I did put a picture of a squash bug, which is the species that you see right here. All right, so speaking of bugs, at peak over the last sort of Q3, Q4 of last year, the Blockly repository had managed to get to 521 open issues. And I took that personally. So over more or less about the time that we transitioned from Google the past few months while we've been at Raspberry Pi from middle of last year or so, we have been working hard at reducing that number. I'm pleased to report that as of when I made this slide, it was at 346, so nearly a 200 issue reduction in our issue queue. There's a lot of work that went into making that happen. So let me talk about where did all the bugs go, would be the natural question from this. We killed them all with climate change. Actually, they went to a number of places. Many of the bugs that were resolved were accessibility issues. Of course, we've been doing lots of greenfield work that you've been hearing all about all day long today, and we've been opening issues to track our progress on that. So yes, some of the bugs were simply not bugs or bugs with our new work that we expected, dealt with them, great. Likewise, lots of issues were simply things that had to be triaged at some point. We've been around since 2011, 2012. Many bugs have been hanging around. We've been busy with lots of things in that time, and it is helpful now and then to just go back and read through the steps. And does this actually still repro? So number of them got dealt with that way. Turns out that sometime in the past decade, they had magically disappeared, which is always nice, but it's even better to not have them tangling up the bug queue so it, keeps it clean and makes it look like we actually are paying attention to this and not letting it turn out like a Alaska summer or a Scottish summer for that moment. I've heard that the midges are going to be a problem for the rest of my trip. We'll see how that goes. So let's do a little bit of a entomological expedition, get our field guides ready, and talk about a few different types of bugs, starting with shiny bugs, which are very shiny because we have polished them to the hilt here. So these are not deal breaker bugs. They're not, serious crashers or anything like that. They're just things that were a little janky and really could do with being polished and improved and made a little nicer for everybody day to day. So first thing I want to talk about here is z-indexes, all right? Now, let's see. SVG only allows controlling z-index by DOM order. This differs from regular HTML and CSS, where you can just set this in CSS and adjust things. A natural consequence of that is that if you want to change the z-index in an SVG, which everything in Blockly is, you have to reorder things in the DOM. That can be a little expensive. It has implications on focus management. A lot of times you may lose focus if an element was focused and has moved to a different DOM layer. So to make this better, we have a class called Layer Manager that provides a few predefined layers for common things. We've got one for blocks. We've got one for bubbles, which also live in their own layer, bubbles being things like mutators and comments attached to blocks. We have a drag layer, which when you drag a block or a workspace comment, it moves to the drag layer, and the drag layer is positioned after the block layer so that everything being dragged seems to float atop everything else without us having to manually manage this in great detail in every single block and all the dragging code. We just put them on the drag layer. Great. All right, so that led to this fun issue where if you drag a block, oh, we missed our previous video. No, this is the resolution of that issue. Here we go. Yeah. Yes, so if we drag a block with an open mutator over to the toolbox in order to delete it, in V12 this would happen. Not the end of the world, but a little bit awkward, a little bit janky, and so I am very pleased to announce that as of V13, that is no longer the case if you drag a block with an open mutator. Indeed, they both appear above the toolbox the way that we intended all along. So nice little fix up there. We also had some kind of overzealous styling. You may need to look carefully at these, but it turns out Zellos had 3 different ways to render a potential connection. This one here, we have a fairly dark yellow indicator, wide line. This one is ever so slightly fuzzy. And this one is slightly narrower than that one. There was a lot of code happening to make this happen. There were actually reasons for this. This actually, again, depends on z-index. The difference between this one and that one is whether the focus ring comes after the SVG oval shape that makes this dark purple bit here. If it does, then you get the wide focus ring. If the oval comes after the focus ring, then you get the narrow focus ring because the oval covers up the internal bit of it. Big fun. There is a reason for the other one there too. Does anybody in this room know the distinction that would give you the fuzzy focus outline versus the regular focus outline? Okay, Rachel doesn't know either. The fuzzy focus outline is when a block is being replaced as opposed to when a block is being connected to an empty connection. I am going to take the fact that none of the Blockly developers in this room knew that as a indication that that was not actually providing useful context to end users. So we have simplified that down. We just have one type of focus outline now in Zelos. It is the dark or the wide yellow one there. Cleaned up a bunch of dead code, closed out 2 issues in the bug tracker with this fix alone, and we consolidated to one consistent approach. So again, not a big deal, just a little bit nicer. Also, for Scratch, I think this came up too. There was some stuff where it was a little janky for some of them. Yeah, this should fix that. So, we also have old bugs. I want to talk about one particularly ancient bug, web components in the Shadow DOM. So, bug number 1114 was opened May 19th of 2017. And it was basically complaining that Blockly couldn't be used inside of web components or the Shadow DOM. I think at the time it would throw an exception and say, hey, you have to be hosting it in the main document. Great. This bug, it should be noted, predates COVID. It also predates Brexit for our present audience. So it's been hanging around for a long time, better part of a decade at this point. And what did it take to actually get this dealt with? So some of those assertions and exceptions came from when we were still using lots of Clojure Google library back in the day. As that's changed over time, some of those have naturally disappeared, and it wasn't actually throwing when you do this. Things just didn't work, didn't render correctly. It's a little janky. We had to clean up some assumptions about document. Shadow DOM basically isolates part of the document tree from the rest of it, and then web components allow you to define a custom HTML tag. So for example, angle bracket Blockly, close angle bracket, and you can just drop that in and have a whole Blockly instance appear there as if by magic, assuming that you've done a little bit of glue code to make that happen. So it can be nice for encapsulation and separation of concerns and not having CSS leak between things and things along those lines. But it means that you can't necessarily just use document and assume that'll work. Sometimes you need the shadow root, so we had to fix a couple places to use the document or the shadow root, depending on what we're currently living in. Also, we had to make the chaff live in the injection div. The chaff being things like the drop-down menu, the contextual menu, let's see, the field editor if you're editing HTML field. All of those things actually were living in a separate global element that was not inside of the injection div. And so again, because this is being contained and encapsulated, those weren't being laid out correctly because they were assuming their viewport was always at 0, 0. But if your Shadow DOM web component is offset some, that needs to be taken into account. Not a big deal, but again, it was janky and not good to use without that. And so, yeah, I'm very pleased to announce you can now use Blockly in the Shadow DOM. You can make a Blockly web component and use that in your app and service. This is new. There may still be some especially sneaky, well-camouflaged bugs we didn't manage to catch. So if you do this, please let us know. We always welcome PRs as well. Helps to keep the bug count down. I should note, in fact, this bug is older than this emoji. That was introduced in the Unicode 2018 specification. So, yeah. We do fix them. Eventually, we have a tendency to, move slow and fix things around here. So also want to talk about some things that aren't bugs because they're spiders, or features, sorry. So this is NASA's control center in Huntsville, Alabama. It turns out the primary modifier key varies from OS and platform to platform. So on Windows, Linux, typically it's control. On Apple platforms, typically it's command, which is a little curious given how much interest Apple seems to have in having a great deal of control. But they prefer command as their modifier key. So to keep your UX good, you want to use the right one, depending on whatever platform your user is actually on. And we used to do this by registering keyboard shortcuts under all of them. So we would register copy under Control-C and Command-C, and they would both work. You probably wouldn't run into this because you just naturally do the one that makes sense on your platform, but the other one would too. And again, little jank. So we now have a nice little quality of life thing called Blockly keycodes .control command. If you bind a shortcut to this, it will dynamically resolve based on the current platform that your user is on. So you can just bind your keyboard shortcut once. On Apple platforms, it'll be command whatever letter you do. On others, it'll be control whatever letter you do. Good to go. All right. So also scary bugs. I don't know. Scorpions don't need to fly, but apparently they can. So good to know. These are the sort of bugs that just, strike a bit of fear into your heart. We got this one here. Let me just try the mouse thing to not have issues. So we have drop downs, and you can hover over them, and that is not supposed to happen. That's not the one that was being hovered over. Why is the menu scrolling somewhere? Why is it, if there's one thing that normal people hate about computers, it is when things jump. And so this would not do. Basically, the menu class itself would look at whatever's being hovered. It would resolve that up because we let you put arbitrary HTML into a menu item. So we have to go from the thing that is being hovered, keep looking at its parent until we find a menu item, look up the click handler for that, or in this case, just move to scroll it into view and highlight it. Great. This caused this weird behavior. This is why it turns out that the checkboxes for the selected item are actually always present in the DOM. They're being done with like a before CSS selector to put the thing in. And they were always visible. They just didn't have any content unless it was set to be selected, and then the before rule would apply. But that thing was absolutely positioned. And so the checkboxes are all here. We're scrolled way down in the menu, but that's the first checkbox up there. So if you hover over this one, you're going to be over checkbox 8 or something. So it's going to say, oh, it's menu item 8 that is being hovered. Let me scroll that into view and focus it, when you actually should have been highlighting menu item 34 or something. The little CSS thing was a handy way to visualize and debug this. Once I saw that, it suddenly all made sense after a lot of tearing my hair out. Yeah, so this one also is now taken care of. If you hover over a menu item, it will be selected and the menu will not be jumping all over the place. All right, the real kicker for this is when it was shown, the position absolute was actually overridden to be position block. So yeah, just got rid of that rule. One-liner fix, all better. And then this one, let's see. I'm gonna go. Yeah, we got a bug report where somebody said, well, I click in the flyout and I hit undo, and then this happens. And redo works too, I will have you know. This is not exactly what we wanted to have happen. So yeah, I looked at that one and I was like, whoops, yeah, I guess my flyout's undone. What's happening here is that the flyout is just a workspace with everything that entails, which includes having an undo stack. So we had done a lot of refactoring of the flyout in both V12 and V13. That introduced this unfortunate regression, and the fix to which is just make sure that we suppress recording undo events before we do layout when the flyout gets populated. So again, nice, quick, simple thing, but yeah, that was a scary bug to see all of a sudden come in. So quick note, many nice bug images from Wikimedia Commons, and yeah, any questions? Might just move along, actually, because we are coming along here. So, oh, do we have one? Okay. Rachel, yeah.
So you gave the bug count at the end.
Yes.
And you gave the bug count at the beginning.
Yes.
How many bugs did we file in the middle of that while you were trying to close other bugs?
Many. GitHub makes this information extremely difficult to find. I would guess at least another 100, maybe 2, probably. So I'd say 100-ish ballpark of these are actually true fixes out of the backlog and not just accessibility triage, new work things that were dealt with. Yeah, we've been busy. Yep.
Just out of curiosity, was the command and control issue actually causing any problems, or was it just, cleanliness?
Yeah, it's causing problems in the sense that it's kind of janky to have the other one bound. And also, when we were doing screen reader stuff, we were having to introduce a lot of additional keyboard shortcuts. And it helps to not be claiming shortcuts that you don't actually need. I don't think there is anywhere where we're doing anything, but it keeps the option open and just makes it easier.
One problem is we have a dialog that lists all the keyboard shortcuts, and we had to add a ton of custom logic to say which of these is the real shortcut, and now we don't have to do that.
One last question. Hello. With your select boxes, do you intend to use CSS anchor positioning and custom selects when
Yes.
they're available? And
Yeah.
what level of availability do you need in order to support them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the web component stuff, I did look at using TS Anchor Select because we do have a lot of code for the dropdowns and the menus that tries very hard to position them within the bounds of the workspace. And I was hoping that we could get rid of that. I think to your point, it's not quite there yet, but yes, it's on the radar. When browser support gets where that's a readily reliable thing, I would like to adopt it. It would let us clean up a lot of code. We do try to support pretty far back on browsers. We don't have a super hard and firm rule on this, but don't want to be the or do we? Okay, Safari 13, what that covered, 13 point something. Yeah. If there are browser compatibility issues for your products, please let us know. No hard guarantees there, but we don't want to be the limiting factor for browser support. So.